Imagine a typical taping of the Graham Norton Show. Easy banter, big laughs, the audience leaning forward for funny anecdotes and wild stories. Now imagine that same night slowly veering into something far more intense. Two world-famous guests sharing the same couch. One is known for steady, thoughtful conviction. The other for airing grievances loudly and publicly. At first, it sounds like harmless disagreement. Then the jokes stop landing. By the time the audience senses the shift, the room has already picked a side. And before the show wraps, one of them won't be leaving to cheers, but to a heavy, unsettled silence. This is a dramatized what-if scenario, not a recap of a real episode, but picture it as if you're in the studio, watching it unfold in real time. The signature glow of the set bathed the stage as the crowd clapped and whooped. The famous sofa, where confessions, chaos, and classic TV moments are born, sat center stage like a spotlighted arena. Graham Norton stepped out, smiling wide. "Good evening, welcome, welcome. Tonight's panel is honestly fascinating," he said, letting the anticipation hang. First up, an actress, advocate, and writer whose words have shaped how a lot of young people see the world, Emma Watson. The applause rose, warm and genuine. Emma walked out with a small, unforced smile. Her look was polished but understated. She gave a brief wave and a nod to the crowd, then settled into her seat. Her body language was loose, grounded. She didn't push for attention, but the room's focus naturally drifted to her anyway. Graham turned with a little flourish, and joining her, someone who truly needs no introduction, Prince Harry. The reaction spiked, louder, more jagged. Cheers, curiosity, and a sharp edge of expectation. Harry strode out with confidence, almost with a stage-trained presence. Dark suit, open collar, chin raised just a touch. He waved longer than the moment required, basking in the spotlight, then dropped onto the couch beside Emma with an easy grin that walked the line between charming and self-satisfied. From a distance, it all looked completely normal. Graham rubbed his hands together. Now, this is exciting. Two people who care deeply about social justice, activism, and, if we're honest, about being in the headlines. Light laughter rolled across the room. Emma responded with a polite smile. Harry's smirk widened. Graham leaned towards Emma. "You have been as busy as ever. Campaigns, speeches, essays, conversations about equality. Do you ever get tired of always being the serious one?" Emma let out a gentle laugh. "I think people sometimes confuse being earnest with being grim. I'm just genuinely invested in what I do." A low hum of approval passed through the audience. Graham turned to Harry. "And you, Harry, advocacy has become a huge part of your life as well. Does it feel the same way for you?" Harry adjusted his position, crossing one leg over the other. "Well," he began slowly, "trying to do any sort of advocacy is very different when you live under non-stop attack, when people question your motives before they've even heard your point." There it was, that familiar, defensive undercurrent. Emma stayed still. No eye roll, no reaction. Not yet. Graham picked up on the weight and tried to keep it light. "Oh, we're diving in early. I was hoping for at least one embarrassing childhood story first." Laughter broke the tension a little, but Harry wasn't done. "I just think," he clicked a quick glance towards Emma, "some people get celebrated for saying the right things, while others have to actually pay the price for living them." The crowd's noise dipped a notch. Emma turned her head and met his gaze, calm and clear. "I don't believe direct experience and careful advocacy cancel each other out. Ideally, they shape each other." Polite, precise, unshakable. Harry arched a brow. "Sure, but there's a difference between talking about systems and being crushed by them." Graham jumped in. "All right, let's not turn this into a competition for who's had the roughest ride." The laugh that followed was there, but thinner than before. Emma rested her hands together in her lap. Hardship doesn't automatically make someone morally right. Taking responsibility for your influence does. The audience reacted, quietly but clearly. Harry gave a short, dry laugh. That's easy to say when accountability isn't chasing you on every front page. Emma's mouth curved into a smallest smile, not mocking, not pleased, just steady. Being in the public eye isn't the same as being oppressed. It's simply part of being visible. What matters is how carefully you choose to use that visibility. The couch suddenly seemed too small for the three of them. Graham cleared his throat, aiming for levity. Well, on that very uplifting note. Harry leaned forward, cutting across him. I just find it curious, he said, his tone now harder, how some people get to position themselves as moral referees, even though they've never actually had to put anything real on the line. Emma turned fully towards him. I've walked away from privacy, from certain roles, from an easier career because of what I believe in. I just don't expect applause every time I do it. You could feel the whole studio go still. Graham blinked, sensing the air change. Right, okay, let's maybe... Harry smiled again, but his eyes stayed cold. Must be nice, he said under his breath, yet still into the mic, to be praised for staying quiet while other people are dragged for speaking honestly. Emma tilted her head. Honesty doesn't have to be loud to be real. A few gasps, a rustle of whispers. Graham forced a nervous laugh. I did promise a bit of chaos tonight, didn't I? This time, almost no one laughed. Harry leant back, jaw set tight, staring ahead. Emma stayed composed, not gloating, not combative, simply steady. And for the first time that evening, the audience fully understood. This wasn't playful sparring, it was a collision of world views, and it was only in its opening act. The pause after Emma's last line was brief, but it shifted the entire mood. Graham let out an exaggerated chuckle, clapping once a bit too loudly. Well, I see tonight's couch came ready for drama, he joked. A few uneasy laughs broke through. Harry's smile had changed, tighter, controlled, more like armor than warmth. What Emma's doing, he said, directing his words towards Graham rather than her, is turning something deeply personal into a neat little theory. Emma didn't cut in. She waited. Graham lifted his eyebrows. That sounds like the beginning of a university lecture. Harry leaned towards the audience. When you grow up inside an institution that dictates your schedule, your relationships, your future, activism isn't a concept, it's a way to try and breathe. A buzz ran through the crowd. Emma nodded slowly. I don't question that those experiences were painful, but pain doesn't erase the need to be answerable for how you respond to it. Harry turned sharply. Answerable to who? He shot back. To the same press that tears people apart for fun? To the same public that treats other people's trauma like binge-worthy content? Graham stepped in. To be fair, the public also bought tickets to be here tonight. That got a quick laugh, but it didn't loosen the tension by much. Emma stayed steady. Answerable to the impact of your words, she clarified, especially when those words travel to millions. Harry snorted. So now being honest is dangerous. No, Emma replied, still calm. Speaking without thinking through the consequences can be. This time the reaction was stronger, a low wave of agreement, subtle but unmistakable. Harry folded his arms. You talk a lot about reflection, as if you haven't benefited from a system that rewards people who keep their heads down and play nice. Emma's expression barely shifted, but a new sharpness flickered in her eyes. I've spent most of my working life questioning systems. What I don't do is confuse being well-known with being automatically virtuous. Someone in the audience inhaled audibly. Graham sensed control slipping from his hands. He leant back, forcing out a bright grin. Okay, let's all take a little imaginary breath before this sofa asks for hazard pay. Laughter came back for a moment, but the crack was already in the foundation.
Harry sank back, lips pressed into a hard line. Emma folded her hands together again, composed as ever. The atmosphere made one thing crystal clear. This wasn't drifting anymore. It was headed towards a breaking point, and when it arrived, someone wasn't going to stay on that sofa. Graham tried to reset the tone with speed and charm, the way he always did. "So," he said brightly, leaning forward, "Emma, new initiatives, new writing, trying to fix the planet in your spare time." Harry let out a short, cutting laugh. It wasn't loud enough to be obviously rude, but it was perfectly timed to interrupt. Emma's eyes flicked towards him for just a second. Graham faltered, then pushed on. "Anyway, and Harry, you've been travelling, meeting organisations, lending your name and time, charity work, causes." Harry leant back and muttered, "Charity."
No one laughed. Graham's smile stiffened just a fraction. Yes, charity. You know, that thing most people do without turning it into their entire personal brand. That earned a soft burst of laughter, but Harry didn't ease up. Instead, he angled his body slightly toward Emma. It looked relaxed, but the intent felt pointed. "You talk like activism is neat and tidy," he said, "like it's math, but the real world is messier than inspirational quotes." Emma nodded once. "I agree, it is messy." Harry seemed almost thrown by the agreement. "Then why do you sound like you've got it all figured out?" "Because over time," Emma replied calmly, "I've learned to ask more useful questions." Graham seized the chance. "Put that on a mug, please." Emma gave him a mild smile. Harry didn't. "You know what I find interesting," Harry continued, eyes narrowing slightly. "When I speak, I get called dramatic. When you speak, you get called courageous." "That's not really about you versus me," Emma answered. "That's about how the message is delivered." Harry's jaw tensed. "Of course, now we're critiquing my delivery." "It's not a critique," Emma said. "It's about being responsible for the way you communicate." That word again, responsible, landing like a weight between them. Harry exhaled through his nose. "You keep using that like it's a weapon." Emma's gaze held his. "I'm using it like it's essential," she said. The crowd murmured in low agreement. Harry's smile returned, thinner, edged with sarcasm. "Must be very comforting," he said, "to talk about feminism and power from a relatively safe distance." Graham inhaled sharply, knowing this road too well. "Okay, I'm just going to—" Emma spoke over him, but gently, not loudly. "Feminism isn't a cozy corner," she said. "It's staying present when people try to reduce your voice to a joke." Applause rolled out immediately, not a roar, but a steady, growing wave, agreement turning into sound. Harry stared at her. Graham gave a strained laugh. "I feel like I should be standing up and clapping, but—" He trailed off. Almost nobody laughed. The reaction wasn't about wit, it was about resonance. Harry shifted, irritation clearly etched on his face. "So you're saying I'm trying to make your voice ridiculous?" Emma's eyes were steady. "I'm saying you're trying to win with attitude instead of argument." Harry's posture stiffened. "Argument," he repeated. "I walked away from my entire life." Emma's features softened for a heartbeat, not in awe or pity, but in recognition. It passed quickly. "People walk away from things every day," she said. "The difference is most of them don't ask the world to constantly thank you for it." The room went dead quiet. Colour rose in Harry's cheeks. "You have no idea what I've gone through." "I'm not dismissing struggle," Emma answered. "I'm rejecting the idea that struggle gives you a free pass to talk down to everyone else." That line sliced through the space between them, not with volume, just with precision. A sharp intake of breath swept across the audience. Harry laughed, but it was brittle now. "Talk down? I'm not talking down. I'm explaining that the world is not your seminar."
Emma's gaze sharpened. Her calm was unwavering, but her words had new steel. "And you're not the only person who's ever been under pressure," she said. "You're just one of the few who keeps trying to turn that pressure into unquestionable authority." Graham finally stepped in, both palms up. "All right, let's redirect a bit." Harry ignored him. He turned partly toward the crowd, instinctively reaching for their attention. "Here's what I think," he said. "People like Emma get turned into symbols, and symbols get treated like they're above criticism." Emma's smile was faint, almost melancholic. "Symbols get picked apart all the time," she replied. "We just don't throw fits every time it happens." The audience reacted immediately. Some laughs, some shocked sounds, then a surge of applause. Harry's eyes widened for a moment. Graham's voice tightened slightly. "Let's keep this reasonably civil." But Harry had moved past civil. His voice rose just enough to alter the temperature. "So now I'm having a fit." Emma escalated. "You're escalating," she said evenly, "because you feel the story slipping away from you." That was the line that truly cut. Harry's mouth opened, then closed again. He glanced at Graham, then back at Emma. "You don't get to analyze me," he said through clenched teeth. Emma didn't change tone. "I'm not analyzing you," she replied. "I'm describing what everyone can see happening." The sofa no longer felt like simple talk show furniture. It felt like a witness stand. Graham leaned in, voice suddenly more urgent than playful. "Harry, Emma, let's—" Harry locked eyes with Emma, his expression sharp and wounded. "You're enjoying this," he said quietly. "You're enjoying making me look bad." Emma's face cooled, not angry, not triumphant, resolute. "No," she said. "I'm relieved that for once a woman doesn't have to soften what she's saying just to keep a man comfortable." The studio froze for half a breath. It wasn't yelled, it wasn't theatrical, it sounded like a principle. Then the place erupted, louder than any reaction so far. Shock, agreement, intensity. Behind the cameras, you could almost imagine producers exchanging alarmed looks. Harry leaned back, as if he'd taken a physical hit. Graham's usual grin had vanished. For a moment, Harry said nothing, then he leaned forward again, his voice low, controlled in a way that felt dangerous. "Careful," he said. "That's exactly the kind of rhetoric that splits people apart." Emma answered instantly. "It only feels divisive when it stops working in your favor." Silence, no shifting, no coughing, just the weight of the line. Graham swallowed. We're going to take a quick break," he said too fast. But everyone in the room knew they didn't actually need a break. What they needed was an exit, and one of the guests was already halfway there in his mind. The stage lights suddenly seemed harsher, not brighter, just heavier. Graham clasped his hands, the usual sparkle in his demeanor replaced by something more cautious. He glanced briefly toward the control room, then back at the couch, where the tension now felt fragile like glass. "Okay," he began carefully, "let's slow this down a little. We're not here to crown a winner, we're here to have a conversation." Harry let out a laugh with no humor in it. "Conversation," he repeated. "This stopped being a conversation the second I got turned into a dissected example." Emma didn't sigh, didn't roll her eyes. She waited with the quiet patience of someone who knows the other person is walking themselves into their own point. Graham leaned toward Harry. "No one is attacking you." Harry swung his head toward him. "Then stop letting her define me." Emma finally spoke, voice calm but firm. "I'm not defining you," she said. "I'm reacting to what you choose to present." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Harry shook his head in disbelief. "Unreal. You sit there wrapped in all this ethical language, acting like you're above it all." "I'm not above anything," Emma said. "I'm simply not frightened by being questioned." The line didn't explode, it just settled over the studio. Harry's jaw tightened further. "You think this makes you strong?" "No," Emma replied without hesitation. "I think being willing to listen makes people strong." Harry shifted, beginning to rise, not fully upright yet, but enough to send a jolt through the front rows. The soft scrape of fabric against the sofa was like an alarm. "Harry," Graham said sharply. Harry lifted his hand, cutting him off. "No, I'm done being talked over by people who think staying calm automatically means they're wise." Emma stayed seated, posture open, eyes steady on him. "Staying calm doesn't equate wisdom," she said. "It's just a kind of self-control." A small gasp passed through the audience. Harry laughed louder now, edges fraying. "Of course, another little lesson." Emma's voice gentled, but not from sympathy, from clarity. "This isn't a lesson," she said. "It's just an observation." Harry straightened fully, now looming over the conversation as if height could restore authority. "You know what this really is," he said. "This is what happens when men aren't allowed to speak anymore without getting picked apart." Emma didn't raise her voice a single notch. "This is what happens when women stop diluting what they mean to make everyone else feel better." Applause broke out, raw, unfiltered, no longer polite. Graham stood halfway, arms hovering as if he could hold the moment back. "Okay, all right, let's—" Harry shook his head, eyes flashing. "No, I'm not sitting here for this." Emma leaned forward slightly for the first time. "Before you walk off," she said quietly. Harry turned to her, clearly irritated. "What?" She looked up at him, as composed as she had been from the beginning. "You keep insisting you want to be heard," she said, "but tonight you haven't tried once to understand." The room seemed to lock in place.